BlockTV. It's time now for HODL with HEDL, a chance for us to zoom out for a moment and take a wider perspective on some of the heady issues that dominate the crypto markets as a whole. And to guide us on this journey of discovery, we're joined by Bitcoin influencer and thought leader, Dan Held, Director of Business Development at Kraken. Firstly, Dan, thanks for joining us again this week.
As usual, thanks for having me.
All right, Dan, so now we've got to deal with a pressing issue this week that's making headlines and creating waves across the crypto sphere. This is the story of Virgil Griffith, an Ethereum Foundation member who went to North Korea in order to, depending on who you speak to, disclose critical information about the use and function of cryptocurrencies, or give a lecture on publicly available information inside the hermit state. Regardless, he has since been arrested and is now threatened with up to 20 years prison for being in violation of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. It's become a real snowball here, this whole situation. Dan, what do you make of it all?
Yeah, so when we build this technology, we do have to be aware that it can be used by anyone. But I think what Virgil did was a kind of a step across that line that we would almost all agree with is a really fucking stupid decision. Virgil was told by the US government not to travel to North Korea. He did anyways, and then spoke to North Korean leadership on, because he's not speaking to the North Korean layman who can actually use this technology. He's basically teaching the North Korean leadership how to use this technology. And usually for North Korea, that technology is being used to suppress and control the population. So what Virgil did was incredibly dumb, to be explicitly clear. And the Ethereum Foundation, for not firing him immediately, was also an incredibly stupid decision. So everyone on Twitter is going, oh, but he wasn't going there on behalf of the Ethereum Foundation. He worked at the Ethereum Foundation. The Ethereum Foundation, if they wanted to distance themselves from this, should have fired him immediately. So this just shows, once again, the complete lack of any maturity over on the Ethereum Foundation side, whether it be their monetary policy, ETH 2.0 scaling, or this. It shows a critical lack of awareness and a lack of ability to understand how an org should work in this world. So I think it's not a fault of, with Virgil, you're going to have crazy people. You're going to have crazy people who decide to do really, really idiotic things. And that's what he represents. But, certainly the institutions around him, like the Ethereum Foundation and others, could have highlighted why this was a dumb decision earlier. Instead, Vitalik actually encouraged him to go. I forget what Vitalik said, but I think it was along the lines of like, have a good time or essentially good luck. So, again, going back to my original point, this technology can be used by anyone, but Virgil stepped across the line of then enabling one of the worst regimes in the world to figure out how to better work with it. And, that's where I think people are feeling a little bit weird about the situation.
Now, speaking of Vitalik here, because he's come out on Twitter since with a thread on December 1st discussing this whole issue and pretty much saying that while there was no association with the Ethereum Foundation, that he supports, as he said, and I'll quote from him, geopolitical open-mindedness, which he says is a virtue, and it's admirable to go to a group of people that has been trained since childhood to believe is a maximum evil enemy and hear what they have to say. Now, what do you say to that sort of argumentation, particularly given he claims, Vitalik this is, that Virgil Griffith was aiming just to give information that was already publicly available within this context? Do you think that argument holds any salt?
Yeah, so that's why I had my first point, which was around, hey, when we build this, anyone can technically use it because it can be downloaded from anywhere. But to my second point, you step across a line when you go travel to that country and teach the leadership how to use it to kind of punish their citizens. So, and this is a country that's had concentration camps for over 70 years. This isn't like going to another country and teaching their local population how to use this to get around their government. This is going to a government and teaching it how to punish their citizens. So, I think Vitalik's in a tough political spot. If he disenfranchises Virgil now, that might look a little funky, and it may look like Ethereum is eating their own. but also supporting him is a really bad decision as well. So Vitalik has put himself in quite a dilemma. Um, it, I mean, it's it's a ridiculous. This space ceases to amaze me how dumb it can be. It's ridiculous.
Do you think as well? I mean, there's Virgil's facing a potential 20 years in prison for this action. Do you think the potential punishment fits the crime?
I don't think so. I mean, I think Virgil wasn't really giving them that much information that would have been that valuable. I think the act itself is just a really dumb move. Not necessarily. I don't think he necessarily disclosed super sensitive information that would have really enabled the North Korean government to get an edge on X, Y, or Z. But yeah, I mean, look, this is crypto. You see these types all the time. I've been around since 2012. There was a lot of crazy people then, a lot of crazy people now. I certainly consider this behavior a little bit on the spectrum of a little bit nuts.
It certainly has had some pretty wide-ranging repercussions, and it'll be a story we'll be following closely as it plays out. It'll certainly be an interesting one. As you say, there's all sorts that make up the crypto sphere, and yeah, it is an interesting one. But moving on now to another perhaps more positive story for the sphere as a whole, which is that Bitfinex, one of the biggest exchanges in the world, has come out saying that and has integrated the Lightning Network into their exchange. What do you make of this news? And important question, will Kraken be next?
Yeah, so with the Bitfinex integration of Lightning, this is something that Bitcoiners predicted a few years back, right during the middle of all the fear, uncertainty, and doubt pushed by the Bcash community that Lightning would never be enabled by corporations. This was also pushed by many of the altcoin supporters and Ethereum supporters, and now we've seen that completely debunked. Lightning will be integrated at exchanges because it services their customers in a way that the exchanges couldn't service them before. I think Bitfinex has taken a really good step in that direction by doing this integration and announcing it publicly. At Kraken, we hired Pierre Rochard, who is a Bitcoin core developer, plus a really big Lightning. He had one of the most connected Lightning nodes out there, and he's championing. He internally is championing for different initiatives. So I can't speak on exactly what Kraken is doing, but Pierre is our point guy on everything Lightning wise, and that was a very recent hire as of a few months ago. So I think exchanges are all kind of warming up to this idea that, wow, Lightning can actually solve a lot of our customers' problems. Essentially at the end of the day, this technology services humans and has to solve a problem for them. When we look at 99.9999% of dApps, those don't solve a problem for anyone. Lightning does solve a problem in terms of fees and speed. So on the Bitcoin network, you can essentially move Bitcoin instantaneously between exchanges or between your exchange and your wallet, and do that in a way that's really, really cheap. And I think what's really cool in the future, you could imagine if two exchanges opened up a channel between each other, then the arb traders could essentially utilize that super fast channel or that super fast Lightning method of payment, which is Lightning, to move assets between exchanges.
Now, what about recent reports that have emerged that only $6 million are being held locked in nodes in the Lightning network, falling 50% from last summer, where 12 million was locked into the network? There are some out there that say they're simply not being used or picked up as it was intended. Do you think this move by Bitfinex changes the equation and gives a sunnier future to the potential for the Lightning network?
So the KPI of Bitcoin locked up isn't necessarily the most accurate one. You'd have to look at like node count and a few other metrics as well. Lightning, being very, very responsible, has limited the channel size in which you can transact. So the Lightning network is very new, and there will be bugs found. Unlike DeFi applications on Ethereum, where they go YOLO, let's just lose 50, 60, $100 million with people's funds. I'm referring to like different hacks or like the DAO hack. Lightning has taken a very, very conservative approach, which is around limiting the channel size, or essentially the max amount of Bitcoin you can have in a channel. And so that very much limits the amount of Bitcoin locked up. So that metric isn't necessarily the right one to look at for engagement. Bitfinex and other large companies adding Lightning support will definitely increase usage, but I wouldn't necessarily say the usage, it's not being used in the way it was intended or anything around like, oh, engagement's dropping. I don't really think we see that.
So in terms of the future of the Lightning Network, what you see in the wake of this announcement and generally in terms of its own development, you're optimistic and bullish about where it's headed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this solves two not necessary problems, but pain points with Bitcoin's protocol, which is around speed and fees. So, as we all hypothesized a few years ago when Lightning first got started, that Lightning would solve these problems, and it is. And this isn't some sort of gimmicky CryptoKitties or something where it's a little pump where people start to do it for fun and they start transferring it around, but it quickly fades out. The Lightning Network has been slowly more and more developed and integrated with bigger and bigger companies. And it's solving a very core need, which blockchains at the end of the day transfer value. And that's what Lightning enables transactors on the Bitcoin blockchain to do a little bit more efficiently.
All right. Well, it certainly looks like it could be an exciting time for the Lightning Network as a whole. Long in development now, maybe taking its next steps into the wider world. Dan Held, Director of Business Development at Kraken, I want to thank you so much for joining us again this week for this week's HODL with HEDL. Look forward to speaking again next week. In the meantime, stay with us at blocktv.com for all the latest in news and information. I'm Asher Westrop Evans. Thanks for watching.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.